Has Ole Miss done enough to fully replace Quinshon Judkins? They've got Henry Parrish and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and we have got Steven Willis of Locked On Ole Miss joining me here on Locked On College Football today. Not surprising after the Judkins departure up to Ohio State to see the Rebels going out to get some running backs, Steven. Are they done at this position now?
No, I don't think they are done at this position. They've added 2 players in the spring transfer portal window, and I do expect them to add a thumper, a big body type, a 4-minute offense type is somebody that Ole Miss is going to potentially bring in. This is really interesting, Spencer, to me, because if anybody's seen the movie Moneyball, Lane Kiffin is basically doing Moneyball in the replacement of Quinshon Judkins. They are literally trying to replace this player in the aggregate. And so they've added Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. They've added Henry Parrish, who is actually coming back to Ole Miss. And hopefully between all 3 players, once they add the big back, they will add nearly 200 carries, nearly 1,200 yards, and probably 15 touchdowns and replace what Quinshon Judkins gave Ole Miss.
Is there another first baseman like Giambi? No, there's not. And if there was, could we afford him? No. Then what the are you talking about, man? One of the greatest lines in my favorite sports movie of all time. I love that you brought that up. That's why we bring him back, folks, just for the Moneyball references. But we'll get a little bit later into Ole Miss's transfer portal class at a glance and why they don't have many other needs here. But let's talk about the newcomers that they have brought in, because replacing a guy of Quinshon Judkins' caliber is certainly not an easy thing to do. But let's start with Henry Parrish, the transfer from Miami. What do you expect to get from him in this pass-heavy attack from Lane Kiffin?
Well, this is actually something that Ole Miss fans know exactly what they're going to get with Henry Parrish, because he was here for 2 years before he went to Miami. He was the running back that played behind Matt Corral. He's never played with Jackson Dart, so that'll be a new thing. But I think you can expect 100 carries, probably 650 yards, maybe 5 to 7 touchdowns. I think that's the goal that they want with Henry Parrish Jr. And whenever you have another back like Ulysses Bentley IV, who is coming back, he's kind of an incumbent. If you look back to what that Ole Miss running back room was like with Matt Corral in 2020 and 2021, Ulysses Bentley IV is kind of a plus Jerry and Ely type running back anyway. So what you're looking for now, and I know you've added the Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, but what you're looking for is that thumper, that big back, that Snoop Connor rolled running back. Ole Miss had a visit on campus earlier this week in Trent Howland from Indiana. He's 6'3", 240 pounds. He would fit the bill perfectly. But I think Ole Miss could potentially take three running backs this spring portal cycle.
Yeah, I don't think that is something we've seen really anywhere else. You see one, that's common, 2 every now and then, but a third running back, when you have an offense that is very much run through the quarterback, and Jackson Dart has got pretty short preseason Heisman odds, I think deservedly so. I have liked him since he was at USC, and he and Lane Kiffin obviously fit very well together off an 11-win campaign and a New Year's Six Bowl victory last year for the Rebels. But how important is getting a 4th running back to work into this rotation?
I think it's imperative, honestly. Kevin Smith, the running back coach at Ole Miss, he likes to rotate 3 different backs. That's something we learned very early in the Lane Kiffin era. 3 running backs is kind of what he goes. They do the hot hand thing for the first 2 quarters, and then the 4th quarter, whichever one's the freshest, they just put that running back in to go kind of batter the defense. I think a 4th running back, and honestly, really, it's a 5th running back whenever you look at Kedrick Reesano, who is a freshman returning back as well. So we'll see how it goes in the fall, but I think it's important for the run game at Ole Miss, who has been either 1st, 2nd, or 3rd in all of Lane Kiffin's years, to kind of get right, because that run game is what's going to make Jackson Dart the prolific player that we think he is. Jackson Dart's going to put up Heisman-level numbers because of the run game, not just because of Trey Harris and Juice Wells and those guys on the outside. You need to have the linebackers genuinely worried about coming forward to stop the run, and that opens up everything behind them.
So Henry Parrish and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in the room at the running back position, but Are there any other transfer targets that you've seen that you think could enhance Ole Miss's chances to not just make the playoff, but compete for a national championship?
I go back and forth on that one. With early in the spring, like Princely Amamielin had to have shoulder surgery. And people were wondering about his recovery timeline and all of that stuff. Does Ole Miss need an edge? And is that edge Tyler Barron, who was one time committed to Ole Miss, ended up at Louisville? It looks like Barron is going to end up back in the transfer portal. And I've heard rumors for probably 6 weeks about Tyler Barron. So when it's over, I'll be glad that it's over. And either way, I just don't want to hear the rumors anymore. But he's a good player on the edge. He provides that little quick twitch spark that Ole Miss needs in the pass rush game, especially if they want to compete with somebody like Georgia, somebody like Alabama, the big boys in the SEC. And if Ole Miss wants to win a national title and an SEC title and all of that stuff, they need to.
Yeah, and I think that for Ole Miss, they've had a really, really good portal offseason. It's been, somewhat quiet compared to what others are doing so far here in the spring transfer portal window. But, adding a guy like Tyler Barron, sure, you take somebody like that. You're not going to turn down a guy of that caliber if you're the Rebels in this spot. But let's also be able to take a step back here, Steven, and remember who currently has the top-ranked transfer portal class in all of college football. And that, Steven, for those on podcast, has got his hand raised right there because it's Ole Miss. It's Ole Miss ahead of Texas A&M, ahead of Oregon, ahead of Colorado. At least, you can interpret those metrics however you'd like. But certainly Ole Miss has had a great influx of talent. Who are those key transfers that college football fans shouldn't forget just because they don't, generate as much buzz because they're not new in the spring window?
The front 7 transfers that Ole Miss got. Princely Amamielin, possibly one of the best pass rushers in all of college football. Walter Nolan, a former #1 recruit in the whole country, transferred in from Texas A&M. And Pooh Paul, keep your eye on Pooh Paul. He played ball at Arkansas. Chris Paul is a really great linebacker. He's 240 pounds, can go sideline to sideline, and is willing to get in there and get physical with people. And playing behind Princely Amamielin, Walter Nolan, and Ole Miss is returning J.J. Pegues and Jared Ivey. That's going to take up a lot of blocks and allow him to run around. I think he can wreak some havoc this year.
One thing that has drawn criticism for those who are not big fans of Colorado is that they don't recruit the high school ranks, and they're just trying to build their roster through the transfer portal. And I was actually interacting with someone who listens to the show the other day who was saying, well, you can't just do it through the portal. You have to have this, and they're not going to be able to get better in time. I think ideally, when you hear coaches talk about roster building, it still is a majority done from the high school ranks. Colorado's certainly taking a different approach, but they improved from 2022 to 2023. That's not even arguable in any sense of the term. Does Ole Miss have that ingrained talent where the portal guys are, oftentimes high-end players, but they're supplementing what is already a good foundational football team?
I think they have a pretty good system at Ole Miss. And what Ole Miss does in high school recruiting is the top end of their class that has always been there, the 4- and 5-star and high-level 3-star players, they're still getting recruited by Ole Miss, somewhere between 10 and 15 recruits every single year. But those other 10 players that we all remember, Spencer, those program guys that you brought in back in the day, the bottom end of the class fillers, Ole Miss doesn't take those. Those are transfer portal spots in this new era. But those top level, Quinshon Judkins was a high school player. Suntaran Perkins, a 5-star. Cam Franklin is going to likely play a little bit this year. If you are good enough, Lane Kiffin will play you. It's not an age type situation. So we will see. Ole Miss is getting all the headlines in the world about being transfer portal. They're getting pretty, not necessarily elite, but very, very good high school talent as well.
Steven Willis, Locked On Ole Miss. Always a great time to have you by on the show. Thanks, Steven.
All right, bud.
Notre Dame has been quiet in the transfer portal. Is that okay? We'll talk about that next.